No one believed the waitress could speak Mandarin the night. She froze in the middle of the noisy restaurant walkway, her tray trembling as she heard a name that should have meant nothing to a small-town server, yet it struck her like lightning. That name belonged to a man who once shaped her entire world, who unknowingly held the key to everything she had lost and everything she was still desperately fighting for. Plates clattered, voices blended, and the smell of sizzling garlic filled the air, but all she could hear was that single name echoing inside her chest like a secret finally being summoned. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of unseen stories, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kind Heart's Corner before the journey continues. The waitress's name was Lian, though the town knew her as Lily, an easier name, a quieter identity. She had arrived in this place with nothing but a small suitcase and the weight of dreams that felt too heavy for her tired shoulders. The restaurant where she worked wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, it was warm, and it was the only place that had been willing to take in a young woman who spoke accented English and carried a past she couldn't bring herself to explain. Every night, she wiped tables long after the last customer left, humming songs from home in a voice she kept soft, as if afraid the memories might crumble if sung too loudly. Yet she hid the part of herself that once glowed brightest, her Mandarin, her fluency, her pride, because the first time she tried speaking it in this town, a group of customers mocked her tone, laughed at her confidence, and accused her of pretending to be something special. So she buried that language deep inside her heart. Silence was safer, smaller, and easier to carry. What the townspeople didn't know was that Lian had once been a rising interpreter in Beijing. She had studied tirelessly, pushed herself to perfection, and earned the admiration of colleagues who believed she was destined for great things. But destiny had a cruel way of slipping through fingers just when one dared to hold it tight. Her mother became ill, her savings vanished into medical bills, and when her mother died, Lian found herself drowning in grief that left her lost and fragile. She needed escape, any escape. So she fled to a distant country where no one knew her story, where anonymity felt like a blanket she could wrap around her wounds. But anonymity also meant invisibility, and invisibility became her everyday life. The night everything changed began like any other. Lian moved between tables with practiced grace, offering soft smiles to customers who rarely looked her in the eye. She took orders, delivered plates, and ignored the faint ache in her back from double shifts she had been picking up to pay off the rent for the tiny room she barely slept in. Her coworkers liked her, but even they didn't know who she truly was. She laughed when they teased her about being shy, nodded politely when they assumed she was just struggling with English, and swallowed every part of her identity that felt too bright for her small life. Then the door opened and a group of men walked in, dressed in suits that didn't belong in a place with sticky menus and flickering neon lights. They carried an air of confidence that shifted the mood of the room the way a storm changes the sky. Conversations dimmed, forks paused midair, and even the manager straightened his tie as he rushed to greet them. Lian noticed how the tallest man in the group scanned the room, not with arrogance, but with quiet curiosity, like someone searching for something familiar in an unfamiliar world. She didn't know his name yet, not until one of the other men spoke it, clearly, loudly, as if announcing royalty. That named a name she had once translated on international conference stages. A name she had seen printed on contracts, news articles, and charity foundations. A name tied to a man whose reputation stretched across continents, a name connected to the billionaire philanthropist, Zhao Wei. Lian froze. Her heartbeat stumbled. Her tray trembled until a glass toppled and shattered against the floor. All eyes turned toward her. A few customers snickered. Her manager sighed, already annoyed. She knelt to clean the mess, her hands shaking, her breath uneven. Zhao Wei. Why was he here? In this nowhere town? In this tiny restaurant where she hid from the world? Her mind raced with memories, interpreting for him at a summit, hearing him speak about lifting struggling communities, translating his words with such precision that he had personally thanked her afterward, calling her young but brilliant. Her cheeks had warmed at the praise. She remembered him not as a distant billionaire, but as a man who treated everyone, from world leaders to staff, with equal respect. She had admired him once. Now she couldn't even stand without her knees wobbling. When Lian finally brought her tray to their table, She kept her eyes low and her English steady, determined not to embarrass herself again. The men ordered. She nodded. But as she stepped away, she heard it, the familiar sound of Mandarin flowing from their conversation, quick and layered with business terms she knew by heart that it tugged at her soul like a forgotten melody. She missed that language. She missed herself. One of the men mispronounced a term. Another used an incorrect phrase. And before she could stop herself, before she could remind herself to stay invisible, she whispered the correction. Barely audible, but someone heard. Zhao Wei lifted his head. His eyes softened with surprise, then sharpened with recognition, not of her identity yet, but of the fluency in her tone. The other men dismissed her, assuming she'd simply memorized a phrase or two. But Zhao Wei gently asked a question in Mandarin, testing her. Her lips parted, and the response flowed from her effortlessly, beautifully, like water released after being trapped behind a dam. The restaurant fell silent. Her manager stared. Her co-workers gaped. The customers who once mocked her felt their smirks fade into stunned silence. Word by word, Lian's hidden world unfolded into the air, her voice trembling at first, then strengthening with each sentence she spoke. And Zhao Wei listened, truly listened, with the eyes of a man who recognized talent, loss, and resilience when he saw it. When she finished translating a complex business phrase one of the men struggled with, Zhao Wei leaned back, studying her face as if trying to place a memory that hovered right beyond reach. And suddenly, it clicked for him. He remembered her, not by name at first, but by presence. He remembered the young interpreter in Beijing, the one who translated with precision and quiet confidence. But what he didn't know was why she was now here, in a small foreign restaurant, wiping tables for minimum wage while burying her brilliance. As the meal progressed, the men continued asking questions, some out of curiosity, some out of disbelief. Lian answered them all, her voice steady now, her fear replaced by a fragile but growing strength. She felt exposed, yes, but also alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. When the group stood to leave, Zhao Wei slipped a business card onto the table. He didn't make a scene. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said, in Mandarin, that talent should never be hidden, and if she wanted a chance to reclaim the life she once dreamed of, he would help. The men left. The door closed, and Lian stood frozen, fingers pressed over her trembling lips, tears blurring the edges of her vision. She didn't take the card immediately. She stared at it, afraid of hope, afraid of wanting too much, afraid that this moment of kindness was just another illusion that would crumble if she touched it. But kindness, real kindness, often arrives when a heart is at its most fragile, and Zhao Wei's gesture reminded her that she was allowed to rise again. For the first time since leaving home, Lian walked out after her shift feeling lighter, as if the universe had finally acknowledged her existence. She looked up at the night sky, its stars scattered like silver promises, and let herself believe, just a little, that she wasn't done. In the days that followed, she quietly practiced her Mandarin again during breaks, feeling the old confidence return. She reached out to Zhao Wei, unsure of what would come next, but ready, finally ready, to step back into the world she had once been brave enough to dream of. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps keep these real, emotional journeys alive on Kind Hearts Corner. Before we end, please take a moment to comment how this story made you feel.